Go ahead and turn your Bibles to 2 Kings chapter 5. 2 Kings chapter 5. Here's a story that most of us are probably familiar with. It's a story about Naaman, who was a commander from Syria who had leprosy. And Naaman his wife had a servant girl from Israel who told him that there was a man in Israel who could cure him of his leprosy. So he went and told his king that someone was there that could do that. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And so the king sent Naaman down to Israel with a lot of silver, a lot of gold, and some clothes to get his leprosy healed. Well, the story goes that he gets there and he goes, sees the king of Israel, and there's a letter, and the letter says, "Here's Naaman, my number one man here, and here's money, and I want you to cure him of leprosy." And the king of Israel, you might recall, was like, "What? I can't do this. You know what? He's picking a fight with me," and he was very much distraught. And then Elisha, the prophet, heard about this, and he said, basically, "Send him to me." And we know that he goes to Elisha, and Elisha sends a messenger out to him and tells him to go bathe, wash 7 times in the Jordan River. Well, Naaman, being a very important man that he was a little bit angry about that. He was a little bit indignant that there wasn't a little bit more pomp and circumstance that was kind of put forth by Elisha so that he'd be cured. So he was leaving kind of mad, and finally his servants talked to him and said, "Surely you want to do this, because if it had been something really big and grand, you would be doing it. So this is so simple, basically just do it." So he did, and we know the story. He was healed from his leprosy, and he was happy, and goes back to Elisha and tries to give him all this money. And great lesson, great story, and we're pretty familiar with this. And there's lots of good lessons that we get from this story in 2 Kings chapter 5. Probably the biggest lesson that we learn or get from that story is the obeying God. The obedience that we have to His Word and do things the way He tells us to do things. And that is a very important lesson for sure. But the lesson, the attention I want us to look at tonight is really takes place after this, and beginning in verse 20, chapter 5, verse, somewhere down through there, verse 15, says, "Then he returned to the man of God, he and all his company, and he came and stood before him, and he said, 'Behold, I know that there is a God in all the earth. There is no God in all the earth but in Israel.'" Behold, in Israel. "So accept now a present from your servant." But he said, "As the Lord lives, before whom I stand, I will receive none." And he urged him to take it, but he refused. Then Naaman said, "If not, please let there be given to your servants 2 mules load of earth, for from now on your servant will not offer burnt offerings or sacrifice to any other God but the Lord. In this matter, may the Lord pardon your servant when my master goes into his house at Rimmon to worship there, leaning on my arm, and I bow myself in the house of Rimmon. When I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, the Lord pardon your servant to this matter." He said to him, "Go in peace." So he's offering him money, but he's saying he's not going to worship any God but the true God. But when Naaman had gone from him a short distance, Gehazi, the servant Elisha, the man of God, said, "See, my master has spared this Naaman the Syrian, in not accepting from his hand what he brought. As the Lord lives, I will run after him and get something from him." So Gehazi followed Naaman. And when Naaman saw someone running after him, he got down from the chariot to meet him and said, "Is it well?" And he said, "All is well. My master has sent me to say, there have just now come to me from the hill country of Ephraim 2 young men of the sons of the prophets. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 festal garments." And Naaman said, "Be pleased to accept 2 talents. And he urged him and tied up 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 festal garments, and laid them on 2 of his servants. And they carried them before Gehazi, and when he came to the hill, he took them from their hand and put them in the house, and he sent the men away, and they departed. Verse 25, he went in and stood before his master, and Elisha said to him, "Where have you been, Gehazi?" And he said, "Your servant went nowhere." But he said to him, "Did not my heart go with you, when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? Was it a time to accept money and garments, olive orchard and vineyards, sheep and oxen, male servants and female servants? Therefore the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and to your descendants forever." So he went out from his presence, a leper like snow. The Bible doesn't really tell us here exactly why Gehazi did what he did. But it's certain that he was not content with what he had. And that's really the focus of our lesson tonight, was not the miracle that Naaman received, but really the lack of contentment in the heart of Gehazi, the servant Elisha. It's remarkable when you look about in chapter 4 and some of the things that Gehazi had witnessed at the hand of Elisha, the miracles, the healing, the bringing back to life the death of the Shunammite woman's son. Remarkable things of God that Gehazi got to witness. But yet, because he was not content in his heart with what he had, those things didn't affect him. They didn't have the impact on him that they should have had. So, tonight, the danger that we have as we sit here in this auditorium tonight is that if we don't have contentment with the things that we have, that can rob us of our spiritual blessings as well, like it did Gehazi. And that's a challenge that we all have to contend with every day. And what a great time as we go into this new year for us to try to learn to be content with what we have. Because if we don't, then we can't see the blessings in our life that God gives us continually. One more passage I'd like to read in Philippians, another familiar passage. Philippians chapter 4, the Apostle Paul said, beginning verse 10, he said, "I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at length you have revived your concern for me. You were indeed concerned for me, but you had no opportunity. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need." And then he says in verse 13, the reason that he has learned this and he can do these things is he says, "I can do all things through him who strengthens me." So, in closing tonight, I just want to encourage each of us for us to recognize and to embrace the blessings that we have. If we're going to be able to do that, then we must learn, like Paul did, we must learn to be content. And for us to learn contentment, we must always rely on the strength that we get from Jesus Christ and the blessing of being in him. So, just an encouragement tonight for us to realize that we're so blessed, we have so much, and we need to be content with what we have and be committed in our lives to share with what we have with the world, not just find the material blessings, but certainly the spiritual blessings. If you have a need tonight, if you have a desire to put Jesus on in baptism, or if you need the prayers of this church, come as we stand and sing.